I never imagined the day would come when my own parents would slam the door in my face. My name is Charlotte. I'm 26 years old, and today I'm going to tell you the most painful story of my life. A story that completely changed how I see family, forgiveness, and the importance of fighting for our dreams, even when it means disappointing those we love most. It was a Friday in September. The weather was crisp in London, and I was in my small flat in Camden, getting ready to go to my parents' house. I'd been invited to Sunday lunch with the family, something that hadn't happened for months. My family had always been quite close, or at least that's what I thought. We were 3 children. I was the youngest and the only one who'd chosen an unconventional path. My parents, Mr. David and Mrs. Margaret Thompson, had always been hard-working people. He was a retired civil servant, and she'd been a secondary school teacher. They'd raised us all with great love, but also with strict expectations and well-defined aspirations. I put on my navy dress, the same one I'd worn to my brother's graduation ceremony, and took the tube towards Croydon, where the house I grew up in stands. Throughout the entire journey, I was anxious. It had been 4 months since I'd made a decision that had shaken the entire family, and this would be the first time we'd all be together since then. The sound of the underground reminded me of the times I'd returned from King's College London, when I was still the dutiful daughter who followed all the plans they'd laid out for me. When I got off at East Croydon Station, I felt a knot in my stomach. The streets were quiet, children playing in their front gardens, the smell of fresh pastries wafting from Mrs. Baker's corner shop, everything exactly as I remembered. But something in me had changed forever. I was no longer the Charlotte who'd left that house to study business management, who'd worked for 2 years as a trainee at a corporate consultancy firm, who'd dated James because he was the ideal son-in-law in my parents' eyes. Arriving at the street where I'd grown up, I saw all the cars parked outside the house. My eldest brother William's black BMW, my sister Emma's white Mini Cooper, and my brother Oliver's red Ford. Everyone was there. My heart began racing. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. It was my mother who answered, and the expression on her face completely chilled me. Her eyes, which had always welcomed me warmly, now held a coldness I'd never seen before. "Mum, hello. I've come for lunch," I said, trying to sound natural, but my voice was trembling. She looked me up and down, crossed her arms, and said something I'll never forget. "Charlotte, you're no longer welcome in this house, not whilst you persist with this madness." I felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. "What do you mean, Mum? What are you talking about?" "You know perfectly well what I'm talking about. This decision you've made to throw everything away to become what you've become. Your brothers and sister are in there. Decent people with proper families, respectable jobs. And you've chosen to bring shame upon our family name." I tried to get past the door, but she physically blocked me. "Mum, please, can we talk? It's about my work as a freelance theater director. I know you don't understand, but I can explain." "Explain what, Charlotte? That you've left a stable job to mess about in some dingy theater? That you've broken up with James, a hard-working young man from a good family, to chase pipe dreams? That you're living in that grotty flat in Camden spending money you haven't got?" Her words hit me like blows. I knew my decision to leave the consultancy to pursue my dream in theater wouldn't be well received, but I'd never imagined it would come to this. "Mum, I'm happy doing what I do. For the first time in my life, I wake up loving what I'm going to do during the day. Happiness doesn't pay the bills, Charlotte. Happiness doesn't provide security. You had everything in your hands, a guaranteed future, and you've thrown it all away on a whim." That's when my father appeared behind her. David, who'd always been a man of few words but had never denied me a cuddle, looked at me with an expression mixing disappointment and anger. "Your place is no longer here, love. Come back when you've come to your senses." My legs trembled. "Dad, please don't do this to me. I'm your daughter." My daughter was a responsible young woman who studied to have a proper profession. "I don't know who you are now." I tried to see my siblings behind them, but the door closed in front of my nose. I stood there on the pavement, hearing voices coming from inside. I could make out William's voice asking what had happened, and my mother explaining that I was insisting on continuing this charade of being a theater director. I walked to the small park where I used to play as a child and sat on the same bench where my father had taught me to ride a bicycle. Tears flowed uncontrollably. I felt completely lost. For a moment I thought about going back to knock on the door, apologizing, promising I'd return to the consultancy. But something inside me screamed no, that I had the right to choose my own life. I took my mobile and called Sophie, my best friend from university. "Sophie, can you come and pick me up? I need you." Whilst I waited, I reflected on the past months. The decision to leave the consultancy hadn't been impulsive. For 2 years I'd worked as a business consultant, earned good money, had a promising future in the corporate world, but every day when I came home, I felt empty. That's when I started getting involved with community theater at weekends, just as a hobby. I directed small productions, worked with amateur dramatics groups, helped bring stories to life, and I discovered that this was what I was truly good at. My first professional commission had come from a fringe theater in Islington. They'd found me through a theater network where I'd shared videos of my amateur productions. The result had been so natural, so emotional, that they'd recommended me to other theaters. Within a few months, I had a small but steady clientele. That's when I'd made the decision to leave the consultancy to dedicate myself entirely to theater direction. Sophie arrived after 30 minutes. She found me still sitting on the bench, wiping away tears. "Charlotte, what's happened? You were so excited about this lunch." I told her everything, from the closed door to my parents' harsh words. Sophie listened in silence, holding my hand. "Charlotte, I know it hurts terribly, but you've made the right choice. I've known you for 8 years, and I've never seen you as fulfilled as you've been these past months. But what if they're right, Sophie? What if I really am throwing everything away? Charlotte, you have talent. Your productions are incredible. Remember that community play you directed about wartime London? The audience were in tears. They said they'd never seen anything so moving. That's not throwing anything away. That's making a difference in people's lives." At that moment, I realized I had 2 options: abandon my dreams to regain my family's approval, or continue fighting for what I believed in, even if it meant being alone. The choice seemed obvious, but the heart aches when we have to choose between self-love and family love. In the following days, I tried to contact my siblings. William, the eldest, had always been the most protective of me. I called him several times, but he didn't answer. Finally, after a week, he rang me back. "Charlotte, I can't speak to you right now. Mom and Dad are very hurt. Perhaps you should give it some time. William, you're my brother. I need you to understand me. I haven't killed anyone. I haven't taken drugs. I haven't done anything wrong. I've just changed careers. Charlotte, it's not just about the career. It's about stability, about the future. You've left James, who truly cared about you, to be on your own. You've left a job that gave you security to depend on sporadic work. That worries us." I took a deep breath before responding. "William, I left James because I didn't love him. And regarding work, I'm building something of my own, something that makes me happy. Why is that so difficult to understand?" "Because we raised you to have a better life than ours, Charlotte. Dad worked his entire life in the civil service so you could study, have a profession. And now you're throwing it all away." The conversation ended there. I understood that for them, my success would only be valid if I followed the script they'd planned for me. Any deviation was seen as failure. I spent the next 3 months completely immersed in work. Every theater project was a way of proving to myself that I'd made the right choice. I directed plays, workshops, community productions, youth theater programs. My diary was filling up more and more, and I'd managed to increase my fees. Financially, I was earning almost as much as at the consultancy, but emotionally, I was infinitely better. Then something happened that would change everything. I was at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, directing a small production, when a woman approached me. She was elegant, well-dressed, and complimented me on my work. "Excuse me for interrupting, but your direction is marvelous. You managed to capture genuine emotion from your actors. My name is Victoria Hamilton. I'm an editor at The Stage magazine. I'd like to discuss a possible collaboration." My heart started racing. The Stage was one of the most respected publications in the theater industry. Victoria explained that they were looking for freelance directors to review and write about emerging theater. "Your vision is unique. You managed to show the humanity behind every performance. That's exactly what we're looking for." I left that festival on cloud 9. Finally, I felt I was on the right path, but the happiness was accompanied by deep sadness because I had no one to share it with. My parents still weren't speaking to me, and my siblings were keeping their distance. 4 weeks later, I received a call that completely surprised me. It was my sister-in-law, Rebecca, Oliver's wife. Charlotte, I need to speak to you. Can we meet today? We arranged to meet at a cafe near Covent Garden. Rebecca arrived visibly nervous, looking around as if someone might see us. Charlotte, I shouldn't be here. Oliver doesn't know I've come to speak to you. Rebecca, what's going on? Is everything all right? She took a deep breath and began to speak. Charlotte, I need to tell you something that nobody knows. Actually, I have enormous admiration for you. I was confused. How do you mean? You had the courage to do what I never had. You see, I always wanted to be a dancer. I even studied at the Royal Ballet School. But when I met Oliver, and especially when I got to know your family, I realized they expected me to be just a good wife and mother. I abandoned my dream to fit into what they wanted. My tears began to fall. Rebecca, I didn't know. Now I have 2 children, a house to run, and sometimes I think about what might have been if I'd had your courage. When I heard you'd left the consultancy to follow your dream, I felt envy. Good envy, you understand? Admiration. But why are you telling me this now? Rebecca looked around again and leaned closer. Because something's happened at your parents' house that I think you should know. My heart started racing. What's happened? Your cousin Lucy, your Aunt Patricia's daughter, visited your parents last week. She brought the Stage magazine, the one where your article about community theater came out. Your parents saw your name credited as a director, saw your work published in a respected publication. I breathed deeply. And what did they say? Your mother remained silent for a long time, just looking at the photos. Your father said something like, "The work looks good," but they didn't comment much. But Charlotte, I saw something different in your mother's eyes. It wasn't anger anymore. It was pride mixed with longing. Do you really think so? I'm certain. And there's more. Your Aunt Patricia praised your work highly, said you had great talent and were succeeding. Your parents listened to everything in silence, but you could see they were paying attention. I left that meeting with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Were my parents beginning to understand my choice? Was there a chance of reconciliation? 3 weeks later, I received a call that would change everything. It was my Aunt Patricia. Charlotte, darling, I need to tell you something. Your father collapsed last night. My world fell apart. What happened? Is he all right? It was his heart, love. He's in King's College Hospital. He's stable, but the doctor said he needs surgery. I didn't think twice. I took the first taxi and went straight to the hospital. Throughout the entire journey, my mind was churning. What if it was something serious? What if I lost my father before we could reconcile? All the grievances seemed small in the face of possibly losing him. Arriving at the hospital, I found the whole family gathered in the corridor. My mother was sitting on a chair, her face swollen from crying so much. My siblings were pacing back and forth, visibly nervous. When they saw me, there was an awkward silence. I approached my mother. "Mum, how is he?" She looked at me, and for the first time in months, there was no coldness in her eyes. There was pain, fear, and something I identified as relief to see me there. "Charlotte, you came." "Of course I came, Mum. He's my father." At that moment, she collapsed on my shoulder and began to cry. "Charlotte, I'm so frightened of losing him, so frightened." I hugged my mother for the first time in months and felt as though a piece of my heart that had been broken returned to its place. "He'll be fine, Mum. Dad's strong." The doctor called us to talk. He explained that my father had a blockage in his artery and needed bypass surgery. "It's serious surgery, but we have good results when the patient is as healthy as he is. Recovery may take several weeks." During the hours before the operation, our family came together in a way that hadn't happened for a long time. My siblings greeted me, still somewhat distant, but without the hostility from before. We spent the entire night at the hospital, taking turns caring for my mother and talking about childhood memories. It was during one of these conversations that my brother William approached me. "Charlotte, I saw your article in the Stage. It was very good." "Thank you, William. I think we were too harsh with you. We didn't mean to hurt you." I held his hand. "I know you did it because you worry about me, but I needed you to trust me." The surgery lasted 7 hours. They were the 7 longest hours of my life. When the doctor finally appeared with news that everything had gone well, our family embraced like it hadn't for a long time. My father remained in intensive care for 5 days, then was transferred to a ward. On the first day, he could receive visitors. I was nervous about going in. I didn't know how he'd react to seeing me. When I entered the room, he was awake, looking out the window. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. "My little girl." "Hello, Dad. How are you feeling?" "Better now that you're here." He gripped my hand tightly. "Charlotte, I need to apologize to you." "Dad, you don't need to." "Yes, I do. You're my daughter, and I threw you out of the house. That's unforgivable." "Dad, you were worried about me. I understand." "No, Charlotte. The truth is I was frightened. Frightened that you wouldn't be able to support yourself, that you'd struggle. I worked my entire life to give you all stability, and when you chose a different path, I thought you were throwing everything away." I gripped his hand tightly. "Dad, I understand your fear, but I had to try. And you succeeded, love. Your aunt showed us your work in the magazine. I was so proud, and at the same time so ashamed for doubting you." At that moment, I felt an enormous weight fall from my shoulders. "Dad, I love you, and I'll always need you in my life. We love you too, my little girl, and I promise we'll support you from now on." During the following days, whilst my father recovered, our family began to rebuild. My mother asked questions about my work, wanted to see more productions, learn about my projects. My siblings gradually began treating me naturally again. But the biggest surprise came 3 weeks later. I was at the hospital visiting my father when my mother arrived with an unexpected proposal. "Charlotte, I've been thinking, how about you direct something special for your father's recovery celebration? When he leaves hospital, we want to have a gathering of the whole family to celebrate." I was moved. "Of course, Mum. It would be an honor. And there's something else," she continued somewhat shyly. "I'd like you to direct a little performance for your cousin's wedding anniversary too. Your Aunt Patricia was enchanted by your work." I realized my mother was giving me, in her way, the professional recognition I'd so needed to hear from her. My father's recovery celebration was one of the most beautiful days of my life. I directed a small family performance for the occasion, telling the story of our family through different generations. Seeing my family reunited again and feeling part of it was indescribable. But the biggest surprise of the evening came when my father asked for everyone's attention to make a speech. "Everyone, I want to take advantage of this moment to say something important. In recent months, our family has gone through a difficult period, and I want to publicly apologize to my daughter, Charlotte." I felt my eyes fill with tears. "Charlotte, love, your mother and I made terrible mistakes with you. You had the courage to follow your dream, to do what makes you happy, and we, instead of supporting you, tried to stop you. Today, seeing this wonderful performance you've created for our family, I'm certain you made the right choice." He turned to me, his eyes shining. "Love, I ask for your forgiveness, and I want you to know that from now on, you'll have all our support. Because a real family supports each other's dreams." I couldn't hold back the tears. I stood up and hugged my father in front of the whole family, feeling that finally I was home again. But the real surprise of the evening was yet to come. When everyone was already leaving, my mother approached me with an envelope in her hand. "Charlotte, this is for you." I opened the envelope and found a check for £3,000. "Mum, what's this?" "It's the money your father and I had saved for your wedding to James. Since you're not going to marry him, we've decided you should use this money to invest in your work. Buy equipment, take a course, use it however you see fit." I was speechless. It was more than money. It was official recognition that they believed in me. 7 months later, using part of that money, I was able to rent a small studio space in Shoreditch. My work as a theater director was growing more and more, and I had a waiting list of clients. The Stage magazine had hired me as a regular freelance contributor for monthly features. But most important of all is that I got my family back. Not just got them back, but we built an even stronger relationship based on mutual respect and acceptance of each other's choices. Last Sunday, during family lunch, my father made an observation that deeply affected me. "You know, Charlotte, I was thinking, we always taught you all that success meant having a stable job, a house, a family. But seeing you today, so fulfilled doing what you love, I've understood that true success is being happy with your own choices." I looked around the table, seeing my parents, my siblings, my in-laws and nieces and nephews, and realized I'd achieved something that seemed impossible months ago, maintaining my individuality without losing my family. The experience of being rejected by my own parents was the most painful of my life, but also the one that taught me most about authenticity, perseverance, and the true meaning of family. I learned that sometimes we have to go through darkness to appreciate light, and that true love always finds a way in the end. Today, when I look back, I understand that my parents acted that way because they loved me and were frightened for me, and I forgive them completely, because forgiveness is what allows us to move forward and build even stronger relationships. If you're going through something similar, if you're struggling to follow your dreams against your family's wishes, know that it's possible to reconcile your personal choices with family love. It may be painful, it may take time, but when true love exists, there's always hope for reconciliation. My story proves that sometimes we need to distance ourselves temporarily from those we love to find ourselves, but that doesn't mean love ends. It means we need time to grow so everyone can understand and accept who we really are. And the most surprising thing of all is that in the end, this experience didn't just bring my family back to me, but also gave me something I never expected. Last month, whilst directing a production at the Royal Court Theatre, I met Thomas, a theatre critic who was reviewing the show for The Guardian. We talked all evening about art, dreams, and the courage to follow our own paths. Last week, I brought Thomas to meet my parents. When they saw how he looks at me, how he respects my work and supports me, I saw in my mother's eyes the same approval she'd once had for James. But this time, it was different, because now they know who I really am, and they know I deserve someone who loves me exactly as I am. My father, who'd always been reserved with my boyfriends, took Thomas aside for a private conversation. When they returned, Thomas was smiling, and my father had tears in his eyes. "This one's different, Charlotte. He really sees you," was all he said. But it was enough for me to understand that I'd finally found not just the love of my life, but also my family's complete approval. As I write this story, I'm sitting in my studio, finishing preparations for a new production about modern families. I look to the side and see the bouquet of flowers Thomas brought me this morning, with a note saying, "For the bravest woman I know, who taught me that following your heart is always worth it." And I think that perhaps this was the most important lesson of this entire journey. That when we have the courage to be authentic, to fight for our dreams even when it seems impossible, life has a way of rewarding us in ways we never imagined. I didn't just get my family back, I didn't just build the career of my dreams, but I also found a love that accepts and encourages me exactly as I am. Life has these beautiful ironies. Today my parents not only support my career, but they've become my biggest champions. My mother always carries my business cards in her handbag, and my father tells everyone he meets about my daughter, the theater director who was featured in The Stage. They've learned that success doesn't have just one definition, and I've learned that family love is stronger than any disagreement. If there's one thing I want to leave with the people listening to me, it's this: never give up your dreams for fear of rejection, and never give up on the people you love because of a disagreement. Sometimes time is the best medicine to heal wounds and open hearts. The pain of separation can be intense, but the joy of reconciliation is worth every tear shed.